The sterile white envelope had no return address, but it felt heavier than junk mail. Inside, the words swam before my eyes. Foreclosure notice. My house? Impossible. I'd paid it off a decade ago. My firm, Meridian Architectural Group, was thriving. I hadn't missed a payment on anything in my life. I scanned the document for an explanation, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then I saw it. A second mortgage, dated 3 months prior, and a signature, a crude, clumsy imitation of my own. My blood ran cold. Below it, a notary stamp, and a name that hit me like a physical blow. Chloe Davis, my old college roommate. Suddenly, my brother Leo's desperate phone calls from last month made a sickening kind of sense. Leo, my younger brother. The charming black hole into which my parents' savings and my own had vanished over the years. A string of bad investments and failed startups, each one a sure thing that required a bailout from his responsible older brother. I finally cut him off 6 months ago after a loan request that sounded more like a threat. I thought he'd hit rock bottom. Apparently, he'd just brought a shovel. But Chloe, that was the wound that cut deeper. We'd shared a tiny dorm room at UNC Charlotte, pulling all-nighters fueled by cheap coffee and architectural dreams. We were inseparable. After graduation, life pulled us apart, but I always believed that bond was solid. For her to be the notary on this, it wasn't just a crime. It was a deep, personal assassination of our history. She knew my signature better than anyone. She'd watched me sign 1,000 blueprints. This wasn't just a forgery. This was a conspiracy, a declaration of war from 2 fronts. My blood and my friend. My hand trembled as I picked up my phone. My first call wouldn't be to a lawyer. It would be to her. Her number was still saved under Chloe. Architect in crime. My thumb hovered over the call button, a tremor running up my arm. This was it. The point of no return. I pressed the screen. The line rang once, twice. On the third ring, her voice, once a familiar comfort, came through. Clipped and professional. This is Chloe Davis. Not, "Hey, stranger." Not, "Arthur, is that you?" Just a name, delivered like a shield. "Chloe, it's Arthur Vance." A beat of silence. I could almost hear the gears turning, the lies locking into place. "Arthur. Wow, it's been a while. How are you?" The warmth in her voice was a cheap imitation, thin as veneer. "I'm looking at a foreclosure notice, Chloe. On my house. For a mortgage I never took out." I let the words hang in the air, cold and heavy. "It has your notary stamp on it." Another pause. Longer this time. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but the lie was flimsy. A house of cards in a hurricane. "I notarize dozens of documents a week. People come in, I check their ID, I stamp. It's procedural." "Procedural?" "You and I designed our dream houses on cocktail napkins in a dive bar on campus. You knew my signature better than I did. You'd forge it perfectly on my coffee orders when I was passed out over a drafting table. Don't you dare tell me this was procedural." My mind flashed back to the night we graduated. We were sitting on the roof of our apartment building, overlooking the Charlotte skyline. "One day, Vance," she'd said, bumping her shoulder against mine, "we'll have our names on those buildings, Meridian and Davis." We'd sworn we'd always have each other's backs, a pact sealed with cheap champagne and unbreakable optimism. "I checked the ID, Arthur," she repeated, her voice hardening, shedding the fake pleasantries. "A man came in with a valid North Carolina driver's license that said Arthur Vance. The picture matched. I did my job." A driver's license. A fake one, obviously. And Leo, with his chameleon-like charm, could talk his way into or out of anything. He probably didn't even need a good fake. He just needed a willing accomplice on the other side of the desk. So Leo, Just walked in, and you didn't recognize my own brother? The guy who crashed on our couch for a month junior year? The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. It was an admission. She knew. She knew the whole time. "Chloe," I said, my voice dangerously low. "What did he offer you?" "I have a client," she said abruptly, the dismissal a slap in the face. "I have to go." "This isn't over," I promised. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, the screen dark. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't even just the house. Leo had always been a parasite, but he was predictable. Chloe, she was the real betrayal. She had been my partner in ambition, my confidant. Now, she was just a common criminal. And the pact we made on that rooftop? It was still valid. I'd always have her back, right where I planned to stick the knife. The architect in me began to see it clearly. This wasn't a wreck to be salvaged. This was a site that needed to be razed to the foundation, and I would be the one swinging the wrecking ball. My anger, hot and chaotic just moments ago, cooled into something far more dangerous. Purpose. Architects don't act on impulse. We survey, we plan, we draw up blueprints. This was no different. My first call wasn't to a lawyer, but to a man named Marcus Thorne, a private investigator, whose discretion I'd relied on for vetting difficult partners on multi-million-dollar projects. "Marcus," I said when he answered, "I have a job for you. 2 targets. My brother, Leo Vance, and an associate, Chloe Davis. I want everything. Financials, communications, recent movements. I want to know who they talk to, where they ate lunch, and what kind of toilet paper they use. And Marcus? I don't need evidence for a courtroom. I need leverage for a war." "Understood, Arthur. Consider it a priority demolition." Marcus didn't ask questions. That's why I paid him. While Marcus excavated their digital lives, I focused on my own site survey. On Chloe. I knew her ambition was her foundation, but it was also her fatal flaw. She always wanted to run before she could walk, to build monuments on shaky ground. I remembered a conversation years ago, in that same dive bar where we'd drawn our futures on napkins. She'd been admiring a new high-rise, a sleek glass and steel behemoth. "It's not about being good, Arthur," she'd said, her eyes reflecting the city lights. "It's about being seen. One landmark project, that's all it takes. Then you write your own ticket." That was her weak point, her desperate need to be such seen. I opened my laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard. Meridian Architectural Group gave me access. It gave me a network. I didn't need to hack into her emails. I just needed to listen to the industry grapevine. I made 3 calls. The first to a friendly rival at a competing firm. The second to a city planner I'd worked with on the new downtown library. The third to a journalist who covered commercial real estate. I didn't mention Chloe's name. I just asked about major upcoming projects, who was in the running, what the buzz was. It took less than an hour. The journalist called back first. "Hey Arthur, you asked about the big fish. There's only one everyone's talking about. The new Charlotte Museum of Modern Art. It's the commission of the decade. They've narrowed it down to 2 finalists." He paused for dramatic effect. "A big firm from Atlanta and a local dark horse, a boutique outfit called Davis Design Studio." Chloe's firm. My jaw tightened. Of course. It was the landmark project she'd always dreamed of, the one she would do anything to get, even commit a felony with my deadbeat brother. The pieces clicked into place with the cold, hard certainty of a steel beam locking into a frame. Leo didn't offer her cash. He couldn't. He offered her a key. He must have known someone on the museum board, a connection he could trade for her notary stamp and her silence. He gave her the chance to be recusine, and she took it. The betrayal was no longer just a signature on a mortgage. It was the cornerstone of her entire career. The journalist continued, oblivious. "The final presentation to the board is next week. The head of the selection committee is a real stickler for ethics and reputation. A guy named Alistair Finch. Alistair Finch. I stopped breathing. I knew that name. He was a former client. I'd designed his lake house in Norman 5 years ago. A project he'd praised for its unimpeachable integrity. I pulled up my contacts, my mouse hovering over his name. The blueprints for Chloe's demolition were complete. It was time to break ground. I didn't call Alistair Finch immediately. An architect never rushes the presentation. First, I composed myself, letting the cold fury settle into a glacial calm. I straightened my tie, even though I was alone in my office. I was preparing for a meeting, a performance. My finger traced the edge of the foreclosure notice, the paper now feeling less like a threat and more like a tool. I pulled up Alistair's number and dialed. Finch. His voice was as crisp and economical as I remembered. Alistair. It's Arthur Vance. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Arthur. Good to hear from you. Not at all. What can I do for you? Another lake house? He chuckled. Something a bit different, I said, my tone level. I'm calling about the new Museum of Modern Art. I understand you're heading the selection committee. I am. A magnificent undertaking. It is, which is why I felt compelled to call. A matter of professional integrity has come to my attention regarding one of your finalists. Something I believe the board would consider disqualifying. I let the word hang in the air. There was a pause. The warmth vanished from his voice, replaced by the cautious tone of a man protecting a billion-dollar legacy. That's a serious claim, Arthur. It is. I agreed, and I have the documentation to support it. I wouldn't waste your time otherwise. Could you spare 30 minutes tomorrow? My office. 10 a.m., he said. Don't be late. The line went dead. Phase 1 was complete. The fuse was lit. Just then, my phone buzzed with an encrypted email from Marcus Thorne. Subject: Priority Demolition. Preliminary. I opened the attached file. It was a beautiful, terrible thing. Marcus hadn't just found smoke. He'd found the arsonist holding the gas can. He'd confirmed my theory, but with details that made my stomach clench. Financial records showed no direct payment from Leo to Chloe. Leo wasn't that smart. Instead, 3 days after the mortgage was notarized, a design consultation fee of $50,000 was wired to Davis Design Studio. The source? A shell corporation linked to a property developer named Julian Croft, a man who sat on the museum's acquisition board. A man Marcus's intel confirmed was a regular at the high-stakes poker game Leo frequented. But the real prize was the text messages, recovered from a cloud backup Chloe had clearly forgotten. Leo, it's done. You're in. Finch's committee gets the final presentation next week. Chloe. Just make sure your end is tied up. I can't have this traced back to me. Relax. You got your shot at the big time. That's all that matters. Just remember who made it happen. Chloe, I'm well aware I made a deal with the devil. I leaned back in my chair, the leather groaning in the silence of the room. I looked from the foreclosure notice to the incriminating texts on my screen. This was no longer just about razzing Chloe's career to its foundation. This was about salting the earth so nothing. I arrived at Alistair Finch's office at 9:58 a.m. His firm occupied the top floor of a skyscraper I'd always admired. The view of Charlotte was breathtaking, a sprawling blueprint of steel and glass under a crisp morning sky. His assistant showed me into a corner office that was less a workspace and more a testament to minimalist power. Finch sat behind a vast mahogany desk, a single file placed squarely in the center. He didn't rise. Arthur, he said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. You have 30 minutes. Let's not waste them. I sat, placing my own slim leather portfolio on the polished wood. I didn't open it yet. Thank you for seeing me, Alistair. As I said, this concerns the integrity of your museum project. You used the word disqualifying, Buck. A word I don't take lightly. Who is the finalist in question? Davis Design Studio, I said. Chloe Davis. His expression didn't change, but I saw a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. He'd probably already decided she was the one. Her proposal is innovative. A bold new voice for the city. What is your matter of professional integrity? A few months ago, I began, my voice a carefully modulated monotone. My brother, Leo Vance, conspired with Chloe Davis to forge my signature on a second mortgage. On my home. The one you attended the housewarming for. I paused, letting the personal connection sink in. The house I paid off years ago. This is the foreclosure notice I received last week. I slid the notice across the desk. He picked it up, his brow furrowing as he read, the silence stretched. This is a serious accusation, Arthur, a police matter. It is. I agreed, but the crime itself is almost incidental. It's the motive that should concern your board. I leaned forward slightly. Chloe didn't do this for a simple cash payout. My brother has no cash. He offered her something far more valuable. He offered her your museum. Finch placed the notice down carefully, his fingers drumming a silent, agitated rhythm on the desk. Explain. This was the moment. I opened my portfolio. I didn't hand him the entire file from Marcus. That would be messy. An amateur move. I had curated the evidence, arranging it like architectural renderings for a demolition. Exhibit A, I said, pointing to the first sheet. A bank statement from Davis Design Studio. Note the $50,000 wire transfer 3 days after the mortgage was filed, labeled as a consultation fee. I then pointed to the second sheet. Exhibit B, the articles of incorporation for the shell company that sent the wire. The director is a man named Julian Croft. Finch's drumming stopped. His face went rigid. Julian Croft. The name landed in the quiet office like a dropped piece of steel. And finally, I said, sliding the third page over, Exhibit C, a selection of text messages between the two conspirators. I'll draw your attention to this one. My finger rested on Chloe's words. I'm well aware I made a deal with the devil. And this one, from my brother. You got your shot at the big time. Just remember who made it happen. Asterisk. Alistair Finch read the texts. He read them again. The color drained from his face. The protector of $1 billion legacy was now staring at a scandal that implicated not just a finalist, but one of his own board members. A public relations nightmare. Police reports, journalistic investigations, the museum's name dragged through the mud. This is, he stammered, his composure shattering. I'll have Croft removed. Davis will be disqualified immediately. I'll make the calls myself. No, I said quietly. He looked up, baffled. No, Arthur, she committed fraud to get on your shortlist. My own board member is complicit. This requires immediate action. It requires the right action, I countered, my voice low and steady. A public execution is messy, Alistair. It spatters. Think of the headlines. Museum board member tied to fraud ring. Winning architect's design, built on a felony. The project will be tainted before you ever break ground. Your bold new voice will become a laughingstock. He stared at me, understanding dawning in his eyes. I wasn't just here to report a crime. I was here to offer a solution. My solution. What are you proposing? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Let the presentation proceed, I said. Let her walk into that boardroom next week. Let her give the performance of her life. Let her believe she's won. Because a fall is meaningless unless it's from a great height. And then, you expect me to let her win? No. After her presentation, but before your deliberation, I will handle it. Privately. She will withdraw her proposal. She will sign a confession, notarized by a legitimate professional this time. My brother will sign one too. Julian Croft will quietly resign from the board for personal reasons. There will be no scandal, no police, The museum's integrity will remain pristine. The problem will simply be gone. I leaned back, the leather chair sighing. I had laid out the blueprint. Now he just had to approve the build. Finch was silent for a full minute, his gaze distant, calculating the angles, the risks, the political fallout. He was looking at two paths. One was righteous, public and chaotic. The other was quiet, surgical, and entirely controlled by me. He was a man who valued order above all else. "You're asking me to let a criminal present to my board," he said, testing the idea. "I'm offering you a way to clean your house without burning it down," I replied. "You get to protect the museum. I get to resolve a family matter." He looked from the damning texts to my face, my expression unreadable, calm. He saw the man who had designed his lake house, the man he praised for, unimpeachable integrity. He chose to trust that man, or perhaps he simply chose the path of least resistance. "Do it," he said, his voice firm, resolute. "But if this goes sideways, Arthur, this conversation never happened." "Don't worry, Alistair," I said, gathering my documents. "I've reviewed the schematics. There will be no collateral damage." I stood up, my portfolio in hand. As I walked to the door, I felt a grim satisfaction. I hadn't just reported a crime. I had been given the authority to pass judgment. The board meeting was no longer a presentation. It was an execution chamber. And I was the one they'd just handed the key. I didn't go to the museum. An architect doesn't watch the wrecking ball swing. He just signs the demolition order and moves on to the next site. My site for now was my brother. While Chloe was presenting her magnum opus, I was sitting in a sterile, rented office downtown, a ghost space with no name on the door. I sent Leo a single text: "Found a way to solve your money problem and mine. My office. 1 hour. Come alone." Greed was always the most reliable bait for my brother. He arrived, looking like a cornered animal, a mix of suspicion and desperate hope in his eyes. He saw me, sitting alone behind a cheap desk. "Arthur, what is this? What have you done?" I didn't answer. I just slid a single piece of paper across the desk. It was a copy of the fraudulent mortgage document. His eyes widened. Before he could form a lie, I played a short audio file from my phone. It was Marcus Thorne's recording of my call with Chloe. Her voice, thin and reedy, filled the small room. "I'm well aware I made a deal with the devil." "The devil is about to get his due, Leo," I said, my voice flat. "Or he can sign this confession, cooperate fully, and I might be convinced not to forward my entire file to the district attorney. Your choice." He crumbled. It didn't even take 5 minutes. He signed, his hand shaking so badly, his signature was almost as illegible as the forgery he'd made of mine. I told him to wait in the adjoining room. The first support beam was out. An hour later, my phone buzzed. A text from Alistair Finch. "She was brilliant. The board is captivated. She's on her way to you." I had given Finch an address, the construction site for the new Meridian Tower. My tower. My landmark. I was waiting on the 40th floor, an empty concrete shell open to the elements. The wind whistled through the unfinished frame, a mournful symphony. Below, the lights of Charlotte glittered, a carpet of promises. Chloe arrived, her face flushed with triumph. She was practically vibrating with adrenaline, her portfolio clutched to her chest like a winning lottery ticket. She saw me standing in the center of the vast, skeletal floor, and her smile faltered. "Arthur, what are you doing here? Mr. Finch said it was a final meeting with a benefactor." "I am the benefactor," I said. "I'm the one who's about to finance your future. Or end it. Sit down, Chloe." I gestured to 2 folding chairs I'd set up, a stark island in the sea of concrete. Confusion warred with fear on her face. I don't understand." "You understood perfectly when you pressed your notary stamp onto a forged document that would have cost me my home," I stated. You understood when you took a $50,000 bribe routed through Julian Croft to get your foot in the door of the museum. And you understood when you texted my brother that you'd made a deal with the devil. The color drained from her face. The portfolio slipped from her grasp, scattering her life's work across the dusty floor. Her renderings of the museum, her bold new voice for the city, skittered in the wind. "How?" she whispered. "You knew my signature, Chloe. I knew your ambition." I placed a briefcase on the empty chair between us and clicked it open. Inside were 2 stacks of paper. "Your partner in crime is in the next building over, having already signed a full confession to save himself. Julian Croft is drafting his resignation from the board as we speak. Alistair Finch is waiting for my call. It's just you now, the architect of your own ruin." I pulled out the first stack of documents. Option A, I make that call. I release this entire file, the bank transfers, the texts, Leo's confession, to the press and the police. Your name will be a synonym for fraud. You'll be disbarred. You'll serve time. The only thing you'll be designing is the layout of your prison cell. Her body trembled, a sob catching in her throat. Or, I said, pulling out the second stack, there's option B, natural justice. I laid the papers out in front of her, a legally binding confession of her role in the fraud, a formal letter withdrawing her proposal from the museum competition, citing an insurmountable ethical conflict, and finally a sales agreement. "What is this?" she choked out, staring at the final page. "That," I said, my voice cold as the concrete beneath us, "is the contract transferring full ownership of Davis Design Studio, its assets, and all its intellectual property to a holding company I control. For the sum of $1. I pushed a pen across the chair. "You built your dream on a crime against me. Now I own the dream. You will sign these documents, you will walk away, and you will never work in this industry again." Her gaze fell from my eyes to the pen, then to the papers that represented the sum of her life's ambition. The fight didn't just leave her, it was annihilated. There was no argument, no plea for mercy. She knew the blueprints of her own destruction were flawless. Her hand, trembling, reached out and took the pen. The only sound in the vast, empty space was the wind whistling through the steel frame and the scratch of the nib as she signed her name, over and over. Confession. Withdrawal. Bill of sale. Each signature was a hammer blow driving a nail into her own coffin. She pushed the papers back toward me without looking up. I didn't check them. I knew they were correct. "You were right about one thing, Chloe," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the concrete shell. "It's all about being seen. And from now on, no one will ever see you." She stood, a hollowed-out version of the woman who had arrived an hour ago, and walked toward the freight elevator without a word. The cage doors rattled shut, and she was gone. I was alone, 40 stories above the city we were supposed to conquer together. I picked up the stack of papers, the ink still fresh. It wasn't a feeling of joy. It was the quiet, grim satisfaction of a structural problem being solved. Leo's betrayal was a surface crack, easily patched. Hers was a rot in the foundation. You don't repair that. You excavate, you rip it out, and you replace it with something clean and strong. I looked out at the glittering expanse of Charlotte. I hadn't gotten my house back yet, not officially. I hadn't recovered a dime. But that wasn't the point. I held her entire career in my hand for the price of $1. My brother had forged my signature to steal my foundation, so I used his to bulldoze hers. She had wanted to build a monument to herself. Instead, she'd become the rubble I cleared away to make room for my own. This was never about revenge. It was about architectural integrity. I'm honestly at a total loss here. Do I press charges and potentially send my own brother to prison? Or do I confront my old roommate first for professionally enabling the whole thing? Let me know what you would do.